So Nick, the last question on the sort of transition. As an early stage company working on groundbreaking user experiences, how do you think about product development? Because if you're trying to develop something that a lot of people can use today, you have to go with the current generation. If you're trying to think about where the world's going and how that impacts your development pipeline and what's possible, certainly 5G is a huge component of that. How do you think about that and walk that line?
So that's a great question, and that's one of the crucial questions in terms of developing a new product that you want a lot of people to use. So our goal was to fit the most amount of features we could into the smallest form factor possible. And we've really seen that if we can make the form factor of these products as small and sleek as possible, then that's going to allow mass adoption from consumers and the commercial side. And the beauty of augmented mixed reality is that there's so many use cases, and some of these use cases you need to display 3D data and stuff that requires a lot of data streams. So for that, we definitely see 5G as having an impact in terms of reducing the latency of any data stream from 10 milliseconds to under a millisecond, and allowing you to watch a lot of different content on the glasses and really experience some of the new wearable product, and from entertainment to commercial use. And there's just so many use cases for augmented mixed reality, and that's what we're seeing that 5G would really help for improving latency.
So, one of the things that all four of your companies have in common is that you're going to be reliant on the carriers to build the infrastructure to deliver 4G. There's been a lot of talk here at CES, just starting yesterday, and including the Verizon keynote on Vesper, really outlined a lot of their strategy and what they felt were 8 pillars for success with true 5G, and that really started a conversation that continued today with some stuff that AT&T did. There is a real question around standards and a real question about how do we create a 5G experience that is really reliable, not just for consumers, but for the companies that are really responsible for delivering experiences to consumers. What role do companies like yours play in helping, I don't know if hold the feet to the fire is the right way of saying it, but making sure that carriers are honest brokers about what really is 5G? Is 5G on Verizon materially different than 5G on AT&T or Sprint or T-Mobile or carriers throughout the world? And how do you ensure that, since you're going to be reselling your services on top of that promise, that there's a there there?
Yeah, let me just comment there, because the role of standards is critical, particularly if you look at the need for interoperability at global scale. And what we saw with 3G is that we did not have a single global standard, and from an investment perspective, for device manufacturers, for infrastructure manufacturers, you're then fragmenting the investment and the ecosystem of the market to which you're going to create your particular solution. So fragmentation is not typically a great way to go faster. But increasingly what we're seeing, and this is more true with 5G than the previous generation of technologies, because 5G is more about computing than it is just the air interface. We're seeing that the role of open source projects are just as critical and really accelerates that open standards process and industry standard setting timeline. So we actually see that there's a growing interdependency between open source projects like the TIC project or ORAN or ONAP or many of the automotive ACC, 5GI squared, a lot of the initiatives around innovation that clearly are anchored on having a consistent set of standards for interoperability on a global scale, but where you can back into some of those releases or some of those features by a de facto approach, right? By actually deploying and being successful and then informing the standards of what is actually implementable at scale and really accelerating that pace of industry standard setting. So, there's this big debate, what is true 5G, what is not 5G. It turns out 5G is so complex, and we know that we're on a timeline for 15, at least 15, 16, 17, but there will be interim releases, and I think those releases will inform many of the features that getting out there and actually deploying through proof of concepts, through early trials, small contained deployments will let us know what is technically feasible, and then what is not only technically feasible, but what is commercially viable at scale. And I think that it's just a bit more of just get out there and do it, as opposed to being in an ivory tower saying, you know, thou shalt do it this way.
Can I put on that?
Please.
Yeah, I think there's something that's going to go on that's particularly interesting. We call this thing 5G. It's a complete reconfiguration of how carriers look at their networks, how they utilize spectrum, how all of the what's called BSS and OSS in the networks is run. It's a complete reconfiguration of the concept of mobile data and many other things. It's also, as we just heard, a new paradigm around computation at the edge computing, edge GPUs, edge CPUs. So the problem in all this, to go back to the question, is it can be so, I'll say the word bastardized for the marketing efficiency of saying, this is 5G, therefore it's better, when it has so many complex components within it. It's almost like saying, you know, if one part of the car is made better, you're calling it a completely different type of car than, you know, just an incremental upgrade. That's being too unfair to 5G. What I think we're all coming to here is that as consumers, as business people who need to create value-added services on top of a 5G compute infrastructure, we need to be very clear as to what's the 5G marketing hype versus what's the 5G technical architectures that can lead to amazing innovation we talked about. And I find that to be problematic in the history of telecommunications companies who always want to put a number, 4G, 4LTE, you know, true 5G, is it fixed 5G, is it mobile, is it 60 gigahertz, all this stuff. In fact, it's really about figuring out exactly what we just heard, the innovations and then the business models, because it won't mean a whit of anything to us if it doesn't have the capabilities and the reliability to deliver unique new entertainment experiences. And I think that's the risk of just being pushed across a technical transformation that's decades long, thinking all of a sudden we've gone from one era to another, and yet we're all defining it differently. So keep everybody honest, audience members, by looking for what are the elements to your business that you need actual 5G capabilities, whether it's low latency, high bandwidth, edge compute, edge GPU, to make your business work, and I think we'd all be in a better place.
So Rafael, I would love to through you transition then to what are the benefits of 5G as a content publisher. Clearly, everyone is excited about it. There's no one that's saying, oh, we shouldn't do this. But specifically for a company like Hulu, as it relates to the ability to do more live programming, what are the benefits that you see of 5G, and why is it so important to Hulu going forward?
Absolutely, and actually going back to a little bit to the earlier point, I think if you look at the timing when 4G came along, the streaming industry really didn't exist at the time. And so I think 4G almost unlocked some of that innovation. Because 5G right now, the situation is quite the opposite, where we have all these capabilities, we have all of these ideas, we want to do all of these great things, and frankly, we didn't have the capabilities to fully deliver on that. Where 5G, if 4G was a little bit ahead of the curve, 5G is almost a little bit behind it, which is fantastic because the promise is that much greater. For us, obviously, it starts with sort of the quality of the experience that we provide. So we talked a lot about kind of 4K, HDR, 8K, basically anything that deserves a higher bit rate and therefore requires a higher bandwidth. That's the easy, low-hanging fruit that we expect to get significantly better and more stable with 5G. The other thing, specifically as it relates to the sporting experience and live program, anyone who's ever watched a basketball or a football game knows that the frame rate per second is extremely important. And once again, that places higher demand on the networking resources, and something that we should be able to push out to get things to 60 frames per second and beyond that, which will make things ultimately much more pleasurable for the consumer. The other area that's super interesting to us is actually around latency, and specifically not just the latency of the end-to-end packet, but being able to prioritize the latency of different traffic on the network. Because for a company like Hulu, who offers an on-demand service and a live service, those are very different profiles. And obviously, when you're watching a football game, having that lag be as minimal as possible is much more important than when you're watching something that's already kind of happened and is in the past. So we do expect that the time to glass is going to continue to shrink, where hopefully soon enough you enjoying your TV game at home will be almost on the same page as someone who's at the stadium. And frankly, just having that level of ability and instrumentation as a network layer will allow us to do great things with latency. How many of us have had an experience where you may be watching a football game or a baseball game and you're hearing your neighbor yell touchdown a fraction of a second or 2 seconds before you actually see it on the screen? With 5G, at least in theory, and it's probably going to take some time to get there will be options not only to get that down, but to even synchronize based on your geolocation and where you are to make sure that that never happens, to make sure you never get that spoiler alert. And once again, ultimately, all of that will allow us to consume more entertainment in a more enjoyable form. And once again, just to kind of summarize, it's not just the delivery to the consumer. The important part is it starts with contribution and all the way kind of end-to-end through. It's really going to unlock a great deal of stability, quality, and frankly, innovation for the things that we're not even anticipating and are able to speak to today.
Yeah, I just want to move one click beyond the live streaming and video on demand, because I think so much of what 5G will enable is more immersive, personalized, interactive experiences. And we did have an opportunity to stand up a 5G network on a grand scale at the Winter Olympics last year in Pyeongchang. And we had 3,800 terabytes of network capacity, 22 live 5G links over 10 different sites, thousands of people experiencing the Winter Olympics in a different way. They were able to, again, through smart glasses and VR headsets, really immerse themselves in the sport. They could see the sport or experience the sport from the vantage point of the athlete. Or they could do video stitching or replays or position themselves in the venue. There's no bad seat anymore, right? You get to choose your seat and your view of that particular venue. And so the opportunity through, of course, low latency, higher bandwidth, but also just more intelligence, more of that edge computing capability being brought to that smart stadium, that smart venue, creates just this wonderful opportunity for more immersive experiences, more personalized, more interactive, more collaborative, more creative, just more fun. And through that opportunity, I mean, I don't know that we know all the services and applications that will come out of it, but back to, if you create this platform where innovation can happen and you can lower those barriers to entry, and if you enable both the incumbents as well as the new market entrants to come in and utilize that underlying capability, the possibilities are really endless. And I'm sure that you have some great...
Yeah, Nick, I would love to what does 5G mean for your company, and specifically for the category of wearables, right? I mean, it was a few years ago when the people who had access, the early adopters, the people who didn't mind looking a little silly, were walking around the streets of San Francisco wearing Google Glass, and it was going to be the harbinger of connected devices that were changing the way that we saw the world around us. How does it translate to wearables, and what is your take on that?
So we definitely see that wearables and smart glasses are the next major technology platform. So we went from your desktop computer a couple of decades back to your laptop, to your phone, and now in the next 5 to 10 years, we see that most people are going to be using smart glasses. The main reason is you can be hands-free, so that if problem of bumping into someone in the streets of New York because everyone's looking down their phone, that could go away if you're wearing smart glasses. So stuff like that, in terms of all the applications that you had on your phone, are going to be ported onto smart glasses, and more complex applications, and that's where 5G could have a really strong impact, because if you're doing things like streaming a movie or streaming any content onto the glasses, and you're in a remote location, or you have a live remote help call on the glasses and you're an enterprise user, or you're streaming 3D modeling data, all that data that requires a lot of cloud processing. For example, one of our applications is live image recognition in the city for law enforcement. So for that, they need to connect to the cloud for all their database information. And right now, there's a little latency, but we're testing with 5G. We're working closely with the Verizon 5G team to see what impact 5G can have on apps like that require you to go to the cloud or you go to the network. And we're seeing that the latency is decreasing by a pretty substantial amount for some of our applications. And as these smart glasses become more profound in society, we're seeing more and more applications every day for all types of use cases, from entertainment, enterprise, healthcare. There's so many cool and useful applications you can do on this platform. And for most of those applications, the latency decreasing on the smart glasses will make a really big impact in terms of making it more useful, more safe for users. Say you're a first responder. We went to an OCR event in Georgia where we tested our glasses with first responders who are going to hurricane first responders or forest fires, stuff like that. And for those mission critical situational awareness situations, latency is absolutely critical, and that's where 5G can also have a great impact for wearable technology. So we definitely see that for the majority of our augmented and mixed reality applications, 5G will have an impact in terms of making it more realistic and making some applications more safe for the end user.
So John, let's go down even a level further and really talk about entertainment. So 20th Century Fox makes some of the best film and entertainment on the planet, and will continue to do so if and when it becomes part of the Walt Disney Company. Maybe this shutdown will delay that, because I don't know who's going to be around to approve it. Talk about the decision to, for example, tell your producers to make something in 8K. Right? It was a few years ago when televisions on the show floor here were talking about 4K capabilities, and the question was, when will content providers, studios, networks start making film and television in Ultra HD or 4K? And there was a real debate about it, right? Because the cost that was in shooting and doing post-production in 4 were now 8K. Was there a payoff in terms of the number of people who would actually experience it, and would they even have a person understand the difference, right? At some point, do we get to a point where, for your average consumer sitting in their living room watching something on the phone, they don't know the difference between 4 and 8K? Talk about, from the perspective of a studio and one of the biggest on the planet, how you're directing your content creators to think about when they take that leap.
Let me help sort of parse that, because it's a great question. And one of the things that
I love it when they keep telling me my questions are great. I want to do this every day.
it was a moderately good
Right,
question.
there we go. That's probably a lot more accurate than I had to say. My wife got to.
The world sort of divvies up between, we'll call it, asynchronous entertainment content, movies, dramas, VOD, TV shows that are not live, and live content. And the predominant driver of value in live content today is sports. So let me start on the classic entertainment side, back to your point about 4K. The issue you see is that it's a cultural genetic issue in Hollywood, and it's also a technical issue. Let's start with cultural genetics. A lot of the great directors are in their 50s, very powerful individuals who grew up with film and creating an incredible experience, or it's a TV show. You probably have to go back to The Sopranos. It's one of the first cinematic TV shows with David Chase. And you look at those and you say to yourself, okay, if you're in that world, how much extra value can be created in an, I'm going to use this word, immersive, not in a 360 AR, VR, mixed reality, but in an immersive storytelling model by upping my resolution on a big screen, or increasingly as people watch things on small screens, that's loss. And what is the cost consideration for doing that? So, impact on the consumer, emotional, narrative, all that good stuff, versus cost, versus hopefully some sort of revenue. And what time and time again in the real world and in academic studies, you find it's very hard to generate incremental value from going from a step change of, for example, 2K to 4K production, and then delivering everything in 4K, and special effects are the really hard part of that. They're expensive.
Hold on, just as distinguished between back in the boom of home video, the step change from letterbox to widescreen,
Exactly.
where everyone went and rebought repurchase their DVD library because you got a different aspect ratio.
Exactly.
That was a meaningful change in the viewing experience.
So the enemy of the truly great is the good enough, and it's a truly great jump to go from 525 lines in a roughly square format to a letterbox 1080 format. And then, well, what was going on the control side of DVD and the like was trip modes and VOD and services like yours. So huge consumer benefits. Then you get to a point where, think about the audiophiles you may have known of yore, who could hear the difference literally if like the amp had, a foot off the, basically, a foot off the floor versus on the floor. That's where you start to see the difference between even really good high quality 2K, 4K, and 8K. It becomes a more marginal increase. No doubt it's better when you stand in front of it. No doubt. Just go to Samsung, LG, and Sony, and you'll see how great 8K looks. On the other hand, you're looking at a world which is specifically optimized to show you 8K in a unique environment, very large screen. The creator would love that as a impactful emotional driver. The problem is when they look back through the production value chain, through production houses, moving the content around, storing on servers, the cost goes scaling. And so in the traditional business as a narrative, it's very hard to make more money on those things. Why you see more theaters upgrading sound than going now for even higher resolution, even though the content's not there. Look at the live business, and I know we did something with you all in golf, and Robert Powers is right there, my colleague who did this. And there's some interesting angles that I think foretell changes for the traditional content world in getting us to higher resolution that could make use of 5G, which is now if you have very high bandwidth connections running in, let's call them 5G-like environments, very high frequency signals like 60 gigahertz, you can transmit tons of data within an environment that makes it easier not to have cables. So when you go to a game and you see how many cables these guys lay, it's expensive just to replace everything. Well, trying to bring down cost in every way you can, utilizing the tech, giving people a better experience, because now you can put cameras where you never thought you could put them, on someone's shoulder, in volumetric capture, or the like. That is another unique use of 5G that brings a tremendous consumer impact, but is not about just better resolution, latency. It is much more about to the back end beating the front end. And those, I think, are the things, I'm using it as an example for you, that we all need to think more about, because there is no clear business model, to Brent's original point, as he put it out there, from going from 2K to 4K to 8K in a great movie. They're not charging more for it, but it's costing a lot more. There are going to be these areas, I think, that we're going to find explosive innovation that may not be in front of the camera, but may deliver an in front of the camera experience for live and for otherwise that just change your mind about the content.
So Rafael, Rafael, I would love Hulu's perspective on that, right? Because again, there's got to be benefits, and we've talked about some of the obvious ones: reduction in latency and the overall quality of the streaming experience. But what are some maybe Hulu specific opportunities that you see as 5G rolls out?
And I think it goes back to, I was going to kind of piggyback on that, because I think specifically in the world of sports and in the world of kind of production associated with sports and, as John said, live events, one thing we've learned, so we've launched our live service about 20 months ago, and the one thing we've learned is people love sports above everything else, and apparently people love football above any other sport by a wide margin.
Football or football around the world?
All football around the world, it doesn't matter, I think that's why it's called actually football. That's how we came up with that, because it's just as popular as soccer is in Europe. But I think, so obviously there's going to be a huge explosion as that kind of from the quality and latency and bringing the consumer ultimately closer to that experience. But the one area that I think is really interesting, and a little bit goes back to John's point, is that I think the video processing capabilities have becoming more commoditized over the last years. You now have providers, a lot of them operating in the cloud, which allow you to rent and get up to speed with running your encoding farm relatively easy. Now, you add the connectivity, the connective tissue that 5G provides. And what I think that ultimately does, that lowers the barrier of entry for more sports to get streamed. So yes, absolutely, the professional sports, the streaming experience for your NFL and MLB and whatnot will get progressively better and better and better. But I think what's really going to happen, the ability for you as a parent to maybe stream your kid's baseball game live, or for some other niche sport, or some amateur leagues, to begin to stream that at a high quality without incurring significant startup costs, those are the doors that get open up, and that's going to sort of open up the type of content that can exist there that frankly is cost prohibitive to do today. I think that's kind of the big change that I'm really expecting.
Yeah, and I was gonna, so that's exactly the point that I was going to make, which is that the proof of concept that we did with Fox Sports and Fox Labs was at the U.S. Golf Open Championship out in New York, and we were able to stream live 4K high-quality video from the seventh hole without using cables, right? We were able to deliver that broadcast quality high-definition video using millimeter wave technology. And the thought that you can have much lower production costs and a much wider accessible market in terms of amateur sports or amateur leagues or junior leagues becomes something that is cost feasible enabled through technology. So it's not always just the content, again, moving to 8K and being able to provide the return for that, but it's just the production costs. And similarly, we've done work with Warner Brothers where, again, bringing more of that compute closer to that filming site where you're not backhauling all that content overnight, hours of production time, and of course time is money when you're filming. The ability to do that much more in real time, much more locally, again, lowers those production costs and makes available so much more innovation and capability because you're doing it at a cost profile where you can address more than one.
So that bridges into something I want to ask Nick about. Before I do that, I just want a quick show of hands. We can, if there are questions, leave a few minutes at the end for a couple of questions, but I just would like to know that so I can pace my questions in anticipation of whether there are some from you or not. So can you just raise your hand if there's going to be questions from the audience or not? All right, 1, 2, okay, so there'll be a few, so we'll leave a few minutes at the end. Nick, some interesting things that were said that I think really translate well to wearables. So, and really what Rafael and what Sandra said about going from the big events that have always had the infrastructure to support some version of live, like the NFL, down to your kids' sports. So, as a parent, and maybe many people can relate, I'm always torn with the notion of wanting to experience my kids' sports through my own eyes and trying to record it for posterity. Am I looking at my phone? Am I looking? Am I actually capturing? And I go back and watch it later. I missed half of it because I was cheering and my arms were flailing wildly. It seems like wearables solves that. I can both experience something and be in the moment, but also click or say record and have it delivered back to me for posterity later without, in a pretty seamless way. How do you think about that?
So that's another moderately great question. But that's our biggest use case for augmented mixed reality at the moment in terms of this live point of view, remote help, being able to experience live situations through AR. So you can easily record your point of view, be hands-free, see your kids' games, save it in a secure database and view it anytime you want. So being able to be hands-free and save and do everything live from your point of view without having to look down at your hands anymore is a major advantage for AR and MR smart glasses. Roughly 80% of the global workforce needs to use their hands daily. And so technology like this is really impactful for them in terms of improving KPIs and helping them improve their task efficiency and things like that.
One of the things that actually was mentioned in the Verizon keynote was the application to brain surgery. The notion that surgeons are constantly having to look at their patient, look back at the monitor, look at their patient, guide devices into sensitive areas like the brain, but if it was all right there in their field of view, it changes things pretty dramatically.
Exactly. And healthcare is one of our biggest use cases at the moment in terms of these live instructions overlaid. I'm not sure if you want your surgeon having these instructions while you're doing it, but for training purposes, it's great. And also in terms of 3D modeling and scanning anything you look at into a model and making those instructions or getting this live computing or any remote help applications. And going back to the football related point, one of my personal favorite apps on the smart glasses, I'm a huge football fan, is imagine an NFL Sunday where you're at the beach, you wear these smart glasses, and you can watch all 16 or 8 NFL games simultaneously with the screens placed in different locations, and it's totally private just to you. So that type of next level content viewing is something we're seeing people having a lot of interest in, and that's something I'm personally excited about, and that's something that 5G would really help with in terms of streaming all the data.
So I'm always remiss to ask people to make predictions on panels because it's not fair. Quite frankly, having said that, I'm going to do it with you. Some of the stuff you're talking about, just as a parent, I'm excited. How far away are we from me being able to put on glasses and record my kid's sporting event as opposed to having to do the normal hands?
So we definitely anticipate that, and most of the market studies anticipate this too, is within the next 5 to 10 years, these smart glasses are going to become pervasive for consumers as well. So right now, they're primarily for enterprise and prosumer use. You have specific use cases you'd like to use them for. But for mass consumers to eventually replace your phone, you need to have all of the capabilities of the phone in terms of the cellular network. Currently, no smart glasses have a cell chip enabled, and we're working on that. 3D tracking, camera, a lot of wide field of view. So a lot of those powerful technologies that, for example, Google Glass, they were the first ones out there, but they were missing a lot of these key features that make these useful for people to wear and would want to replace their phones with. So once those features can be miniaturized into a small form factor that looks like a pair of glasses, then it will become pervasive and replace your phones. And that's something we anticipate technically is feasible within the next 5 to 10 years. Then we can make something that will look like a pair of glasses almost. John?
To build on that, so and this goes back to the Anto comment, that what we're really defining or building with 5G is a new infrastructure for the presentation of video, audio, and any sort of data form that you want to bring to a consumer without some sort of large computational device with you. So right now, if you look at VR, you're wearing a backpack, a location-based experience, it's heavy, 60 gigahertz, Paul probably shown this, I'm sure it does the same. You can use glasses, you get an incredible VR, AR, mixed reality experience. What then that does is that allows the entertainment community a much broader base of display capability and computational capability to take things that may not just be sports, but be narrative and otherwise. Pokemon Go is a very early example. But what if you really enjoyed, and I'm going to use, Bohemian Rhapsody, and you wanted to do behind the scenes of what a Queen concert was like, and you literally were in a locale, you were in England at Wembley, and 5G was pervasive, and we could bring you that experience with, fully constructed avatars of the actors and everything like that. It may be VR, it may be AR, but what it would be the extension of your entertainment passions. Could be a TV drama into a world beyond the display form factor of phone, TV, computer, into an interactive, immersive world. It could have business models because the network and the computational capability is already there, not thinking of it in the post-production model. And all of a sudden, creative minds from the gaming business, from the entertainment world, are just going to jump on this. So I'm hopeful that 5 to 10 would be, it is right because it can't come more quickly to have some of these exciting things get out to the market.
So I have a question for Rafael and one for Sandra, then we'll open it up. So whoever has questions, if you want to start making your way to the microphone, we'll hopefully get to as many as possible. So Rafael, one of the things that feels really opportunistic when you think about 5G is the ability for platforms like Hulu to reinvent even the notion of what content is and what experiences are from. We've seen recently the notion of choose your own adventure, which has long been discussed as a content paradigm. It's been relegated to sort of a very niche, part of the publishing business, and it's making its way to streaming. Legacy businesses like cable providers and satellite providers, they just can't do that. They can't flip that switch. How does 5G represent the opportunity for companies like Hulu? And obviously this is you and your team working in concert with your programming and development people, the creative side. But it gives you the opportunity to sort of crack open the egg of what is content, and how do we think about that going forward?
I think that's probably the biggest question of this entire panel, right? Because it opens up doors that, as I mentioned earlier, we can't even begin to think what is possible. And it goes back to the point where things like VR, things like choosing your own adventure, things like AR, just a few years ago the computational power of connectivity was not there. Now we have the ability to do so. We have the ability to connect server farms with very powerful devices with kind of that network in between. The biggest part that we're seeing is consumers like the experience to become more comprehensive. They like their experiences to become more immersive. That's a term that I think we've heard several times on this panel, and that's ultimately what's being unlocked. I don't think we know exactly what shape it's going to take, but it's from you driving to work in your self-driving car and being able to fully immerse, and I think Intel unveiled the Batman experience just over the last couple of days, but not just be fully immersed in that experience, but also actually be socially interchanging information and getting additional metadata from others around you that may be enjoying the same experience at the same time. To doing that, once again, to having the live sporting events and connecting the people in the stadium with people at home, the possibilities are endless. I think what we're excited about is that we're very early on in this game, and the doors are beginning to open, and I'm hoping we are talking only about a year or two until 5G really starts taking hold, but right now it's just we're sort of tingling with excitement, but it's a little bit difficult to fully understand what shape is it going to take, except for it's going to be all around us in every imaginable shape.
So again, a very quick question, and we'll do a quick answer, then we'll get to as many folks as possible. Intel, more so than anyone else on the stage, it sits at the center of the gaming universe, and whether it's esports or whether it's PC or mobile gaming, how does 5G change the landscape of games, either for publishers and developers, consumers? What's possible with 5G? You know, Fortnite's a pretty addictive experience. I can't get my kids to stop playing. How does even something like that change and get better beyond the obvious things like latency?
I think, again, you have to go back to what can be more immersive, what can be more personalized, and what can you do on a grander scale to reach more of the people that want to enjoy these different experiences in the way that you can on high-end PC gaming machines, and we love all of our customers that have those, but increasingly people are spending more time on their mobile devices, and we know that many more hours are being spent now on mobile devices than even on traditional TV and other linear platforms. And so this idea of creating cloud games, whether it's cloud gaming on your device where you have a similar experience, even if you don't have that same encode, decode, render, inference capability in the device, because you've brought that compute closer to that point of data creation or data consumption, we get very excited about, because you are bringing the compute to the user and not experiencing what we know today is that distance matters, and so the latency does impact the quality of the experience, and with 5G you no longer have to have that trade-off between speed and quality. So more immersive experiences, more of the compute coming closer to that point of data creation and data consumption, and the ubiquity of having virtually unlimited compute capability to deliver on this promise, this vision of this immersive, interactive, collaborative, and creative experiences.
Awesome. So we're going to try to get through. Well, listen, I want to thank everyone in the audience for being a great audience and all the questions. More importantly, I want to thank everyone up here who has so much expertise to offer. I certainly learned a lot. I hope that everyone up here had a good experience. I hope everyone out there continues to have a good experience here at CES. There's panels throughout the day here. There's great stuff at Sands. There's amazing content and entertainment programming over at ARIA, which is free with everyone's CES pass. So I encourage everyone to check out as much as possible, and it'll be interesting to see how far we've come when we're back here next year. Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.